science enthusiasts. My name is Jason Zakowski. I'm a high school chemistry teacher and a science communicator, but I'm also the dog dad of Bunsen and Beaker, the science dogs on social media. If you love science and you love pets, you've come to the right place. Put on your lab coat, put on your safety glasses, and hold on to your tail. This is the Science Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Science Podcast. We hope you're happy and healthy out there. If you are listening to this the day it comes out, that's a Thursday. It's summer holidays for Chris and I. We're done teaching school and we're looking forward to some of the projects we have for July and then taking some holidays in August. One thing I'll mention is if you follow us on social media, I am delving into the realm of video science communication. It's a little nerve-wracking to be on camera. I'm getting better at it. I've got 3 of them done, and I think they get better every time. It's something that doesn't take that much time that can add a lot of extra good science communication in a different realm than the Science Podcast. You might notice that some of the stories are from older podcast episodes, though in talking to people that listen to the podcast regularly, most people say they don't remember that long ago. So it's okay to recycle it. They're all really good stories. Okay, well, what's on the Science Podcast this week? In science news, we have to talk about that frozen baby mammoth. It's such a cool story. And in dog science, at the end of the year, Bunsen and Beaker come into my classroom during exam breaks. So I found a new study that looked at the impact dogs have on kids. It's just so wholesome. In Ask an Expert, we have Simon Spichak, who is a science communicator himself. He has a podcast and he does a lot of work with increasing the mental health of students. It's a really good discussion. Hey dogs, what does a boss bacteria call his employees? Well, his staff. That's a bit uncultured. Oh my goodness. All right, on with the show. Because there's no time like science time. This week in science news, let's talk about the preserved woolly mammoth baby that was unearthed in the Yukon. That's one of the territories of Canada. Before we get to the story, let's talk a little bit about the woolly mammoth. There are some interesting things that I found in doing a deep dive on what they were. The woolly mammoth and the mammoth aren't really the same size. I didn't know that the woolly mammoth wasn't super huge. The woolly mammoth at full-grown size would be about roughly the size of an African gray elephant. There were other types of woolly creatures too. There was a woolly rhinoceros. What the heck? Compared to things like the dinosaurs, the woolly mammoths were relatively close to human history. In fact, humans lived at the same time that many of the woolly mammoths did. The last of the woolly mammoths died out about 10,000 years ago. A very small population, between 500 and 1,000, lived on an island called Wrangel Island. That was only about 4,000 years ago. The very last of the woolly mammoths that lived on this island lived there 1,000 years after the Giza pyramids were built. Now, the mammoth's remains were found on the traditional tribal territory of the Trondek-Huichin. That's one of the Canada indigenous people. And in their language, the mammoth is called Nunshoga, which means big baby animal. Oh, that's cute. When we talk about the tusks of the woolly mammoth, they were about the same size also as the African gray. Now, when we talk about the little baby, the calf that was found, it was frozen in permafrost. There's areas way far north in the Northwest Territories, the Yukon, Alaska, called permafrost, which means it never ever thaws. This remains is probably over 30,000 years old. Now, how did they find this preserved body of a woolly mammoth? Well, it was how most things in the north are found, digging. And it was digging for gold. In doing exploratory digging for gold, geologists from the University of Calgary, which is right south of us actually, they made the discovery. So what's next for this animal? Well, it's a perfectly preserved specimen. Aside from some weathering, it does look like a little baby elephant, except it's a woolly mammoth. As you can expect, paleontologists are very excited about the specimen. Many of the people that looked at the photos, including those that helped unearth it gently, were beside themselves with the amazing quality of the specimen. They're very excited to continue the study of the remains. It'll also help our scientists figure out the lives and behaviors of these creatures that really lived recently in human history past. One of the things that's cautioned is the permafrost in areas of the north is melting. These frozen in time specimens may be uncovered and lost if people aren't around to see them as they thaw out. It's hopeful that further specimens will be found, which may include things that lived at the same time, like cave lions and the giant steppe bison. That's science news for this week. This week in pet science, let's talk about dogs and kids. Every exam break, and it's been a while because of COVID, the rules are relaxed a little bit and I get to bring Bunsen in. Now, Beaker is a new addition to this, and she comes in too. And it is amazing the effect that dogs have on students. The temperature of the room is lowered. Everything is more calm. There's more smiles. Everything is more relaxed. And after this and getting prepped for the podcast, that's where I saw this study. So let's talk about it. It's no surprise to educators that if students have prolonged exposure to things that are stressful, learning is impacted negatively. This could be stress at home. This could be bullying at school. This could be a lack of food. Anything that causes physiological or psychological stress has a huge detriment to learning and the retention of long-term memory. Schools have tried a whole bunch of stuff to help with mental health. And in my opinion, after COVID, they're going to have to redouble their efforts. Our school is doing this as well. We've added yoga, wellness rooms, relaxation rooms. We've added mindful discussions and mindful meditation. These all have been tried to help reduce stress in kids. And in scientific studies, they've helped. Now, this study is a little bit different. Instead of using yoga or meditation or physical activity, they use dogs. They test the stress hormone cortisol in the saliva of 105 8 to 9-year-old kids in the United Kingdom. They also had a smaller group of about 45 kids with special needs also located in the United Kingdom. The students were separated into 3 groups. Remember, you need a manipulated variable. One group got dogs as a method to reduce stress. The second group got some kind of relaxation work. And the third group was the control. Sadly, they didn't get anything. In the dog group, the people interacted for about 20 minutes with a trained dog and their handler. So, well, I guess Bunsen and Beaker would be considered trained. Definitely Bunsen more than Beaker. And I'll tell you, the kids love interacting with those dogs. The meditation group involved 20-minute sessions of relaxation, and the sessions were carried out twice a week for about a month. Now, some of the results may not shock you, but some I found really interesting. In both the mainstream and the special education students, as the school term went on, cortisol levels went up. School was ramping up, kids were stressed, more stress hormone. However, the kids that were in either group that had the dogs had no significant increase in cortisol. As well, the cortisol levels went down after each dog session. So this is, I'm just getting goosebumps talking about this. The dogs protected the kids from the stress hormone cortisol, and took whatever baseline they started with and lowered it. And this is so important because this was for both mainstream kids, like the academic kids and the less academic kids that I teach, but also the special needs kids. Those are kids that are not necessarily in mainstream school for any kind of spectrum disorder. There was a bit of a help in the relaxation group compared to the control, but it wasn't anywhere near as significant as the dog group. There are issues with bringing dogs into school. That happened actually when I brought Bunsen and Beaker in. On the day I brought Beaker in, I took her to go visit some other kids in other classes, and I didn't know, but there was a girl in one of my colleagues' classes that was terrified of dogs. She's a new Canadian, came from a place in the world where dogs are not seen as pets, they're seen as threats. And Beaker wanted to say hi to her, and before I could grab her and realize what was going on, this girl was terrified, like very, very visibly upset, and I felt awful. So, of course, we have to be careful when we bring animals into classrooms that have mixed groups from all over the world that may not be ready to accept a dog as something that's not a threat. Also, you have kids that are allergic. However, when you have a mix of kids where the dog is appropriate, man, I just think The small amount of money that it would take to bring dogs into classrooms would be so worth it, especially with the mental health issues we are seeing in children after the COVID pandemic. That's Pet Science for this week. Hello, everybody. The Science Podcast will always be free to download and listen to. You'll never have to worry about paying for it. But we have some amazing ways that you can help us out with running the show. The first one is to think about becoming a patron on Patreon. And we call our patrons now the Paw Pack. There's a whole bunch of awesome perks and different tiers of support. We also have a very detailed and excellent merch store. And if you're listening to this in time, we have pre-orders of the Bunsen 2.0 stuffy that was just adorable. You can check it out. There's also the Beaker stuffy on our store and a whole bunch of comfy clothes. The third thing you can do is give us a good rating. Rate the podcast wherever you're listening to this. We'd love to get a great rating from you. Okay, back to the show. It's time for Ask an Expert on the Science Podcast, and I have Simon Spichak with me today, who's the co-founder of Resolve, a science communicator, and a journalist. Simon, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for being a guest on the show. One of the things we ask our guests right away is, where are you calling into the podcast from? Where are you in the world?
So I'm calling in from Toronto in Canada.
Okay, yeah. Have you lived there your whole life, or have you moved around for job/work?
So I've lived there most of my life, but I ended up moving to Ireland for a few years for grad school.
Are you from Toronto originally?
I was born in Israel, where I spent 2 years of my life that I don't remember because I was a baby.
You're a little baby.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, I've lived either in Toronto or for a few years in Ireland.
Gotcha. Okay. Big difference between Toronto and Ireland, though.
Ireland has a lot less cities, and the cities are substantially smaller.
Yeah, exactly. The other question I have for you, Simon, what's your training in science?
Yeah, great question. It's always a bit of a really curvy, windy road, and somehow I've ended up here. In university, I was really interested in doing research about the brain, so I did a lot of research projects, volunteered in labs, worked with labs, and I graduated with my bachelor's in neuroscience, and then I went off to Ireland because I thought I wanted to do a PhD, and I went to a lab where we studied the ways that the microbes living in our gut talk with the brain. Over the course of it, I experienced some mental health problems, decided to drop down to a master's, focus more on training for science communication. So I ended up doing science stand-up, where a comedian trains you to do stand-up about your science and your research. And I did a lot of other things, and I even got to host a local science TV show for one episode because someone canceled last minute. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool.
But at the same time, I was finding that I liked writing, but I didn't like academic writing, because what's the point of writing a paper when the only people that are going to read it are most likely going to be academics? And sometimes they'll just skim through it to find the right passage that they're looking for so that they can cite it. So instead, I became really interested in communicating not just at different events, but through writing. And that's eventually how I veered off into journalism as well. And at the same time, I also wanted to do something to help other students struggling with their mental health. And I got connected to my co-founder, Noah, who lives in Toronto. And we started up a company that helps students access affordable mental health supports and therapy.
That's super admirable. So Simon, were you a person when you were young that was into science? Like, you went into undergrad in neuroscience. Were you interested in that as a kid?
Oh yeah, I really loved all those, really detailed picture books with, details about space or different animals. And they always did well in school when I was younger, and I was particularly interested in the science. And originally, I wanted to become a doctor, but then I got more interested in the process of discovery and going into the research aspects of it. And so you can kind of say that I followed the path of curiosity, and it eventually led me to neuroscience and later the microbiome.
Okay. So that kind of leads into my next question. You have some background with working with microbes that that talk to the brain or in our body. And one of the things that when I was doing background on you that you know a little bit about, and I would be super curious for you to talk to us about, is microbe farts. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and first off, I just want to say that they smell really bad. Trust me, I've accidentally gotten some on my lab coat. Not a pleasant experience. They actually smell like doggy doo-doo in a way.
Great.
But the idea with microbe farts goes back a long way in evolution, because a lot of these bacteria and other microorganisms evolved alongside with us. What I mean is we have tons of open space around the environment, but the moment multicellular organisms, things with more than one cell, popped up, all the microbes thought there was a really good, real estate opportunity, a new niche that they could explore. And eventually it came to the point where the host body, the one that was being invaded by these microbes, would eventually adapt. So some of these microbes would eat some of the food that a multicellular organism eats. So, for example, if I eat sourdough bread, those fibers, I can't break them down myself, but the bacteria in my gut can. And when they do this, they do a fermentation that generates a byproduct, a fart, or they're called short chain fatty acids, but they should be called short chain farty acids because of how bad they smell. And our body actually has receptors for these farts. So cells inside of the gut, immune cells, and even cells in the brain are actively, trying to get one of these microbial farts attached to them so that they can activate and perform some sort of function. Now, we're not entirely sure how this whole evolution thing came about. We're very happy with the agreement that we have now regarding those microbial farts, especially since if you get animals that don't have any germs, don't have any microbes, don't get any of these farts, there's a whole lot of problems that occur in development in the entire body and throughout the brain. So I wanted to see specifically, what do these farts do and how important are they? And I was looking at cells in a dish. So, our brain, we always think of these cells called neurons as, the main guys, the main characters, the protagonists of our brain, but they only make up half of the brain's mass. The others are star-shaped cells called astrocytes that happen to have this receptor on them. So I was trying to grow some of these astrocytes and throw some farts onto them to see what would happen. We don't even know how these farts are supposed to work with the astrocytes. And for anyone tired of hearing me say farts, I'll say the technical term, short-chain fatty acids. Of course, if you get any of those on you or on your lab coat, they are going to smell up the place. The other thing I did was a really big literature search and review and analysis of all the papers at the time that I could find that looked at what microbes are in the gut and what kind of farts they're producing as well as some measure of brain health or disease to see whether some types of farts across studies were associated with some sort of disease or health outcome. And that's kind of what we know about microbial farts. And it looks like there's some evidence that they might be involved in keeping the brain healthy. But of course, there's quite a lot we don't know just yet.
What does the body do with that? Like, there's some specific things that we know that they do, or is it kind of mysterious?
Yeah. So short chain fatty acids in particular, there's other kinds of things that microbes fart out. They can fart out molecules that can signal with the nervous system anywhere in the body. But the short chain fatty acids, a lot of us know that certain cells are able to be activated by them, but we're not really sure what they do, what concentration, or how much of them we need to have some sort of effect. In the gut, there's cells lining the gut and immune cells, and it can stimulate immunity. It can also signal with the peripheral immune cells, and it can also regulate their development early in life to make sure that you develop a strong immune system. In some cases, delivering short-chain fatty acids directly to the gut was associated in a reduction of perceived stress. Of course, that's one small study, but it sort of tacks on to everything else that we've been working on in the brain, where you see that short-chain fatty acids, some of them may be able to make the blood-brain barrier a little more permeable so that other things can get to the brain quicker. But of course, that was seen mostly in cells, in cell culture, rather than in the actual brain. And in the brain, we don't know what they do, how much of them actually get to the brain, or how they would even work.
So, mysterious but important.
And they also help with the development of the microglia. These are like the Pac-Man-like cells that act as the immune system in the brain. Basically, they go around, feeling around, searching for stuff, and the moment they hit some cellular debris or connections between brain cells that don't need to be connected anymore, they sort of turn into a round blob like Pac-Man and digest them.
Hey parents, this message is for you. Do you want your kid to listen to an educational podcast made for kids, edited by a kid, hosted by a kid, where we interview kids? Then subscribe to Chase Your Dreams with Brayden Chase. I'm Brayden Chase. In my podcast, we find out what kids' dreams are and help chase them. Whether it's a job, visiting somewhere, a crazy dream, or anything you can think of. I help them figure out what it takes to chase their dreams. It's educational, and I've been told it's pretty funny too. So what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button so your kids can chase their dreams today. Brayden Chase is not responsible for your kids' dreams getting bigger and uncontrollable laughter.
Gotcha. I like your explanation of the Pac-Man, because they gobble up all the things that shouldn't be there. But I guess would the short chain fatty acids be the power pellet for them then?
No, the power pellet is all the junk in the brain.
Okay, I gotcha.
They might be it might be more like a situation with the ghosts, that are chasing Pac-Man and getting Pac-Man to move around and eat stuff, where having those short chain fatty acids ensures that the microglia, the Pac-Man cells, are able to mature and do their work properly.
Gotcha. That's so interesting. I've got a lot of follow-up questions, but I think we got to move on to our next one. I find that whole area of research of what bacteria do for us is so in its infancy. Like, we just don't know. I did a story not too long ago about fecal implants, like taking basically poo, which has bacteria in it, microbes, and implanting it in another person, and they got actual health benefits from it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's not super well understood why that is. They have ideas, but still, it's mysterious but useful.
Our lab did some of that with mice, where a study led by some of my colleagues and one of my fellow PhD students, shout outs to Marcus Bohm, Katie Gazetta, and Thomas Bastiansen. What they led was a study where they took some poop from old mice and they took some poop from young mice. When they gave the young mouse poop to the old mice, some of them showed cognitive benefits. So the idea is that there's something in the microbiome that can somehow regulate brain activity and cognition. There's also a phase 3 clinical trial ongoing for Alzheimer's with a drug called sodium oligomanate, which is basically a seaweed derived fiber that feeds gut bacteria and is purported to improve cognitive function by actually going through the immune system, which would then go to the brain. But it's still early on to tell whether that's going to succeed.
So fascinating. I wish when I was around the farts of my students, it made me smarter, but I don't know if it does. It's just frustrating and disgusting. So, Simon, thanks for talking to us about the importance of, or the mysterious importance of microbe farts. My other question for you kind of stems from how I introduced you, and you've co-founded this organization called Resolve. Could you talk a little bit about Resolve?
Yeah, so as anyone listening probably knows, mental health is a problem, and mental health, especially with students in high schools, universities, colleges, grad schools, sometimes there really isn't a place where students can get the help that they need. That's one of the challenges I saw, because quite frankly, some of the counselors that I was given in university weren't very good. And some of my friends have had really terrible experiences dealing with the mental health infrastructure within universities. The idea that myself and my co-founder Noah had was that one of the problems with mental health is that we aren't looking at the whole picture most of the time. So, for example, if a student is struggling, they have to make an appointment with somebody who's an academic strategist. And that's one place they'll need to go. Then they might need to make an appointment with a career counselor to discuss their options. And then they might need to get on a wait list to see a therapist. And most often in universities, the therapists are mostly there for acute care. So if somebody is having a mental breakdown, they can help, but it doesn't facilitate a long-term relationship between a student and the therapist, right? It's kind of like you go to the doctor to get a checkup, even if you know both of your arms and both of your legs aren't broken. You just go there because you know it's healthy to get a checkup. Same thing with mental health and figuring out your life goals and priorities. And that's kind of what we were pushing towards. So what we ended up doing was hiring some therapists that are excellent within all those three areas. I'm not sure if you remember a movie from the 90s. I believe it was Armageddon, where there's a meteor coming to the Earth, And for whatever reason, they decide to train some oil drillers to
Yep.
be astronauts to fly to the asteroid rather than training the astronauts to drill, which would have been probably a simpler solution. The idea here is that a lot of psychotherapists already have some of these skills. We can supplement the rest by providing them with a lot of resources and some training. And that means we can have therapists that are able to kind of look at the whole picture and deal with OCD, ADHD, anxiety, or depression, along with all of the academic concerns that come with them. It really shouldn't be that difficult for students to find good, affordable mental health care. The other thing we can do is for certain universities, students actually get insurance that covers the cost of the majority of the session. So our sessions start at $100, $100 a piece. So that's $100 for 50 minutes of high quality therapy with a therapist that we've interviewed and screened, therapist that's certified to work in Ontario, which is the province that Toronto is in. And it's really amazing because the students, they want to come back when they find a therapist that kind of vibes with them and that's able to help them through their problems.
Yep.
We're also starting up free peer support programs to try and help other students. So we've trained up some peer supporters who are going to be running groups with people talking about mental health and whatever concerns they might come to that session with. We think it's really important to provide free resources and educational support because a lot of these skills are simply things we should have learned earlier in life as well.
What has the response been? What have people been saying?
Well, we haven't been around for more than 2 years, and we've only been offering therapy since September or October of last year. So in 2022, we've had a lot more students booking sessions, so up to 70 or 80 sessions in a month. And we get students that actually go back to the same therapist over and over and over and over again. And to me, that's the best sign that something is really working.
So if you're in Canada, where can you find, let's say you're a student listening to this, right? Where can they go to get into the program? Where can they look?
So they can just go to www.resolve, that's resolve with 2 V's, .ca, and they can check out our website. If they sign up for our newsletter, they get 5 free ebooks about mental health, organization, and time management skills. And then they can join our peer support program, which will be up and running soon, or they can click through and see our therapists. And within 4 or 5 clicks, they can book their first free consultation.
That's amazing. You know, I've talked to a lot of scientists and science communicators on the podcast, and one thing that I'm finding that gives me hope is just how more accepting society is to talk about mental health. Whereas in the past, it was like, keep it to yourself, tough it out, suck it up, buttercup kind of thing. And then people like you are bringing it out into the open to say, hey, if you have a mental health problem, there's nothing wrong with that. Here are some tools to help. And I think like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, nobody would have, when I went to school, this was like nothing. Nobody talked about it. Nobody said anything about mental health at all.
And there's also a lot more people being diagnosed now, but there's a few new stigmas popping up. Like now I know I have OCD, anxiety, depression that I get treated in part with antidepressants. And there's a lot of stigma still going around with antidepressants. But folks, if you could cure depression or OCD just by thinking happier thoughts and not having impulsive thoughts, then we wouldn't be here talking about this problem.
Yeah. No, if you had a broken leg, you're going to get XYZ treatment for your broken leg. Like, it's just, I'm not saying you have a broken leg or this is kind of similar, but there's medical treatments for medical diagnosis.
Yeah. And it turns out that the brain is located inside of the body as well. So why should we treat it any differently?
Oh my goodness, Simon. Good job. That's great. I love that. Well done. Oh, you made me laugh out loud. That is so good. Yeah. Very good point. Well, Simon, thanks for talking to us about Resolve. We'll have a link to your Resolve website in our show notes. So anybody that's listening, you're one click away from just checking out what Resolve's about. Or if you need mental health support, that's just one more tool in your toolbox and you're one click away. So good on you, Simon. Thanks for doing that for society. That's a big deal.
Yeah, no, it's my privilege to be able to work on something I'm passionate about.
Mm-hmm. So I have another question before we get to our standard ones, and that's about science communication and journalism. That's something that you're passionate about as well and that you do. Could you talk to us about what you do in that area? What do you do with? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to know more.
So I've discovered that I basically have 3 pillars of what I want to do in life, and they break down roughly into improving mental health, telling people about science and bringing good quality information about it, and cats and raccoons, but that's for later questions. But anyways, what I realized is that a lot of science reporting isn't great. There's a lot of clickbaity headlines, and sometimes press releases that get churned out into articles are wrong, or they really, really overstate the conclusions. I think there's enough excitement in science that we don't have to embellish anything. On the other side of things, there's also a lot of people who publish things about science that isn't very critical, because you really need to understand that there's a lot of politics in play in science. As much as people want to be apolitical and unbiased, you can't do that because the world is political. We live in a society. Bias is a thing. Mm-hmm. And especially what I'm seeing with a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence research coming out is that there aren't a lot of people asking critical questions about the ethics of what's going on, because some of these types of research are trickling down into technology that affects students and, kind of trickles into surveillance capitalism. So you have proctoring companies that aren't really able to discern what's going on a face of someone who's Black. Or you have those companies that think if someone's crying, it looks like cheating because algorithms. And people think that they can just, offset these problems onto algorithms when they really can't. Mm-hmm. The other thing I really like is I write for Being Patient, which lets me cover everything in the Alzheimer's world, and I don't have to embellish anything. I can explain the exciting stuff and the limitations, and sometimes we can even write about when certain science headlines get things wrong and set the record straight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's as a science communicator myself, I have to be really careful when I'm breaking, because every week on the podcast I break down something exciting in science, and I always have to say and use word terms like this could, this may, because if it's a news article, we're talking about, one study that came out that seems promising, and it's not the cure for anything. It could be, or it shows promise, or it could lead to. So yeah, I see those headlines and it's clickbaity. They're like, new scientist says blah, blah, blah. Well, the scientist probably didn't say blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You got that. You wrote that headline so people will click through your story.
The other thing I love is nerding out with scientists. Because of my background, I can read through the papers and I can pick up tidbits. And it's just really awesome sometimes when you can kind of discuss in nitty-gritty detail what was going on. I also have a bit of a background in bioinformatics and statistics, which serves me well when I'm talking to someone who does epidemiological research on large populations, looking at associations. And the coolest thing I can say is, wow, that just raises more questions than answers.
Yeah.
Right? I was covering this recent finding where I got to talk to the researcher about it. And what they looked at was they took individual cells from people who had Alzheimer's, from people who were old but healthy, and for young people. And they just looked at the individual brain cells to see how many mistakes or mutations they acquired in their genes. And it turned out that in Alzheimer's, there is this weird pattern of mistakes that kept popping up in the cells. And the researcher termed it a mutational signature. Of course, what does it mean? No one knows, but we're very excited about it.
You found something you didn't know. That's what science is all about.
Yeah. It's just very cool to think about that these people are the first to discover this new thing, and I get to write about it.
Oh yeah, it's very exciting. I love talking about that on my podcast and getting feedback from our listeners. Yeah, you're right. Science doesn't need to be any more exciting than it is. You just need the right people to tell the story of science, and you're on Team Science that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Simon. We have a couple standard questions that we ask our guests about that our audience loves to hear. And the first one is, could you share a pet story with us from your life?
Figuring Out Family isn't your ordinary podcast. It's a completely new experience that helps you make your family the best it can be by giving you the deep insights to help your family thrive. You'll learn how to help your family have more productive conversations and manage life's disappointments too. You'll feel inspired by the special guests that are experts in their field of family relationships. Get valuable tips for dealing with difficult family members, repair broken relationships, improving your parenting skills, and keeping your children happy and healthy. Check it out now.
Yeah, so when I was working on my master's in Ireland, one of the places where I lived for the longest time, I lived in this house with a wonderful housemate named Carla, and Carla had a wonderful cat named Freya.
Okay.
And Freya was the best, especially when, I was having a rough day or COVID hit, because she'd always come to cuddle up. Now, the really funny thing is, Freya is very unique. Let's put it that way. Whenever my housemates would leave their butter on the counter, Freya would get into it and start licking it. Anytime anyone was making chicken, it was obligatory to pay the cat tax and, get some plain chicken just to give Freya. And of course, Freya loved going outside. We had her on a leash, and it was really funny because at the slightest resistance, she'd start to think she was trapped and start meowing, even though her leash just caught a rock or a stick.
Yeah.
So that was really funny. And eventually my housemate started seeing someone. And at first that person was talking about, oh, we're being such, we're being the cat's pets. We're being slaves to the cat. A few weeks later, he comes home with a giant cat tree for Freya. And a few months before I leave, he adopts his own kitten.
Oh,
So that's cats for you.
That's cats for you. Yeah. Through the research on my podcast, we switched, we have a cat now because she's on this food that seriously takes away the fel D1 protein that is the thing that most people are allergic to. So like I've come to love this cat very, very quickly. I always have liked cats. They're very different than dogs, very different than dogs, but they're very special in their own way. So yeah, cute. What color what color is Freya?
That kind of like mixed brownish, goldenish kind of thing where the cat looks almost, as majestic as a lion, that kind of breed.
I love it. I love it. Super cute. Well, thanks for sharing your story about Freya, Simon.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
The other question we ask our guests about or to share with us is something called the super fact. And the super fact is something that when you tell people, it kind of like blows their mind a bit. Do you have a super fact you could share with us?
Yeah, you know that there are more viruses on Earth than there are stars in the sky. And a lot of these viruses are bacteriophage, which are basically viruses that hunt and kill bacteria. And they're constantly killing all the bacteria in the ocean. I forget how quickly they do it, but I think they kill a ridiculous amount of bacteria every day. And in total, there's more of all these viruses on our planet than stars in the sky.
Oh my goodness. I heard something about like the epic ocean battle that goes totally unnoticed by us between these bacteria viruses and the bacteria. Like the virus slaughter the bacteria every day, but because bacteria replicate so quickly, they just make more of themselves.
Yeah. We have the same thing going on in our gut. So some people think that in fecal matter transplants, the thing that's actually doing the work is the virus.
What?
Because they can remodel the ecosystem. It's kind of like you have a jungle and you bring in a hunter, and the hunter goes in after one of the keystone species or predators, and it takes it out, and boom, everything changes.
Wow. I never knew that before. The 2 super facts in one, sir. Good job.
Yeah, I just love talking about the things in poop.
Yeah, it's not such a crappy discussion, that's for sure.
Yeah, imagine that. I can't believe I get paid to write about poop and constipation.
Oh my goodness. That's a great super fact. Thanks, Simon. The last section of the podcast, we get to know a little bit more about our guest on a more personal level, and it's called the important to you section, another great pun. And we ask our guests to share something that they're passionate about in their lives. It could be a hobby, a cause, and you wanted to talk about sipping coffee. I'm intrigued.
Yes, so coffee is it's like this almost magical thing because you have these cherries, and the seed inside of these cherries is what turns out to be the coffee bean. And we remove the cherry, we roast the coffee, and we end up with, a magical drink. And what's really cool now is that you can find coffee beans that are sourced from single lots or single farms. They're more expensive, of course, but the quality is outstanding. There's different flavors that you can explore. And best of all, you know that the people are actually getting compensated fairly for the coffee. So that's definitely a W. Now, what I like doing with my coffee is going for walks, because back in Ireland, I lived near a lake where I like to say I was friends with the birds, because I just buy a kilogram of bird seed and just feed them all while I was sipping my coffee. And back here in Toronto, my favorite cafe is near this place where a lot of pigeons like to congregate. So I just sip my coffee and watch the pigeons whenever I need to de-stress.
Yeah.
Sometimes I forget there's other people there and I start talking to the pigeons a little bit, but it's okay.
I talk to my dogs all the time. Don't worry about it. I think if people listened into my conversations, they'd be like, what's going on there? You mentioned before we started recording that you spied a raccoon.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's like the most amazing moment of my life. I'm in the park watching birds and everything, and I see something moving nearby, a really, really, really fluffy butt. And it turns out that it's a raccoon. It's paying no mind to anyone. It's just picking up some grubs, washing them in a nearby stream, turns around, takes a look, and then just goes about its own business. And then a few weeks later, I spotted possibly the same raccoon just climbing a tree. So I said hi, and it got startled, and it looked at me, and then it went about on its merry little way.
Hey everyone, my name is Catalina. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor and a babe with a mobility aid.
My name is Haley. I'm a PA with POTS and a water allergy. We are the hosts of the Doing It Disabled podcast.
Haley and I are on a mission to create an honest dialogue about living with disability and chronic illness. We would like to open up our corner of the internet to both learn and teach about the lived experiences of the disabled community.
Join us as we navigate this world that was not created with us in mind and watch how we do it disabled. Head on over to Spotify and check us out.
I love it. I have never seen in the real life, like not a zoo, but I've never seen a raccoon. They just don't live where I am in Alberta, Canada.
Yeah, so the funny thing about Toronto is we actually had a whole quote unquote war on raccoons, where because raccoons are very persistent animals, they kept getting into garbage cans. So the city paid a bunch of consulting and engineering companies to build something that was raccoon proof. So now our garbage bins have a handle that you have to turn to open so you can lock it in place. But of course, some of the raccoons started knocking it over, and then they could just, twist it open. So we spent a lot of money to be outsmarted by raccoons.
Oh, man. Yep. Rocket Raccoon from Guardians of the Galaxy isn't too far from the truth when you look at real life raccoons, I think.
Yeah, we actually used to do a lot of psychology research on raccoons. Well, not really a lot, because the raccoons kept escaping from the cages. So you couldn't run a lot of tests on them because they just escape.
Escape artists. I love it. Well, I'm going to think the next time I get a nice cup of coffee, I'll go for a stroll with it. I'll take a page from the Book of Simon. Does that sound pretty good?
Yeah. It's very much appreciated. Make sure to say hi to the pigeons. They're majestic, underrated animals.
I will. I don't think we have any pigeons nearby, but we've got a ton of birds. We live on a farm, so the pigeons, I think, are more city folk.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I do say hi to the chickens every day. We have chickens, so they're definitely around and around all the time.
Chickens are surprisingly smarter than we give them credit for.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. They're also survivalists. They're pretty hardy birds.
Well, they used to be dinosaurs millions of years ago.
So you got to give them some credit, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're at the end of the chat today, Simon. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Science Podcast, talking to us about Microbe Farts, your excellent organization, Resolve, and some amazing stories and heartwarming stories. So, Simon, thanks for being a guest on the show today. Can people follow you on social media? Is there any links that you'd like people to know before we close out here?
Yeah, people can follow me at Spichak Simon on Twitter. You can check out our company Resolve at www.resolve.ca. And you can also take a look at our Instagram for Resolve, which is at Resolve with 2 V's, mental health. Sorry, at Resolve Student Mental Health. We can add a link into the bio as well, where we generally post a few times a week because, of course, it would be weird if, as a mental health company, we were constantly scrolling on Instagram.
Thanks again for being a guest today, Simon. This was such a fun chat.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure.
Okay, it's time for story time. I mean, Adam, if you don't know what story time is when we talk about stories that have happened within the past 1 or 2 weeks. You know what? I will start. So I don't know if we've posted this on Twitter or anything yet, but Papa, Mom's stepdad, he's the one with Doc. If you've been around for a bit, you'll know who Doc is. He has a couple cats, and that's where Ginger originally was. She was at his house, and he lives very close. He lives like not even like 500 meters, which is like, he lives very close. So that's where Ginger like came from, because we brought Ginger home and we brought her to his house. I started her on the anti-allergens and whatever, but yeah, so he lives close. But he got a new kitten, and the new kitten, he's a feisty one. He has lots of attitude. The cat's name is Mouse. Finally, we took a little bit to name him because Ellie was the one who had to name him. So you can imagine that there was some pretty goofy names in there. Papa said that,
like Top Hat or something.
Yeah, something random like Jablabins or something like that. Yeah, so the cat's name is finally Mouse because he's small and gray. He's cross-eyed, so his eyes are crossed. And he might be like that forever. It doesn't impact his vision, we don't think. But some cats just don't, just are born cross-eyed and become not cross-eyed. Some of them just stay cross-eyed. So yeah, new kitten named Mouse. He's got a feisty personality. He bit my butt once. I was sleeping and my butt wasn't underneath the blankets, and he started biting it. Well, not my bare butt. I was wearing like shorts, but he was still biting my butt. And then he bites like your feet when you're walking. It's funny. He's a funny guy. Anyways, that's my story. Mom, do you have a story?
I sure do. My story has to do with Beaker and Ginger. Now, there's been some tough love kind of situation happening between them. But you know what? Beaker is the reason why we can have nice things.
Beaker is the reason why we can't have nice things.
Beaker is the reason why we can and cannot have nice things. It's like Schrodinger, nice thing or not. Anyway.
Have you seen her playing with Bunsen's toys?
Yeah, she's a Shredmageddon. Anyway, so as you may know, cats like to use anything and everything as a cat scratch post. So what I've done is I bought like a little cactus scratching pad for her, and I bought like this big mansion for Ginger to use, and she doesn't use them. I bought this thing that goes up against the wall, and as advertised, the cat will love it. No, not at all as advertised. So instead, and then I was very worried about the new furniture we got. I was like, oh no, the new furniture. So I went into a pet store and I said, do you have that deterrent to put on the furniture? And they said, no, but we have an attractant to stick on the things that you would like Ginger to be using as a cat post. So it's a honeysuckle. I've put the attractant on anything that I want Ginger to go on. Also not as advertised. Not sure if she likes it, but when she starts using things that she's not supposed to as a cat scratch post, like our kitchen chairs, like the couch,
like my chair downstairs,
like Well, I'm sorry about Adam's luck for his chair downstairs, because what Beaker does is she is on high alert. She is cat scratch police. Woo, woo, woo. She comes in and she's like, no, you will not do that. And she stops Ginger from scratching, which I think is awesome.
And she doesn't do it and bark. She just comes over and like aggressively stares at Ginger.
I think she has the teacher stare down pat.
Yeah.
Because that's what it reminds me of. And that's my story.
It's so funny that like though she doesn't like those shenanigans, yet she is like a bundle of chaos most times of the week.
Yes. Sometimes how do they say that? Do as I say and not as I do?
Well, I wish I had a Bunsen story, but I don't. He's just a good boy. He's a rock star. I'm filming these new science videos and he's so agreeable. If I need him to do anything, I'm like, well, let's get Bunsen. I get it done in like 2 seconds. So props to Bunsen. My story's about Beaker. So Ginger has this fish that we got. Did I buy the fish, the floppy fish?
No, I bought that.
All right. It's this cute floppy fish. It flops around. Cats are supposed to chase it. I think Ginger kind of liked it. It freaked everybody out, and safety officer Bunsen removed it from the premises. So it was kind of freaky, and Bunsen's like, no, taking it away. And he just took it away from everybody and put it someplace else. Well, the floppy fish made a return, and before Bunsen could stop Beaker, she surgically removed the robot that lives inside it. And the robot started to it just lost its damn mind. It didn't have an off switch without being in the floppy fish. It was this robot from hell. Beaker couldn't stop it. It was flopping around the living room for probably 10 minutes. And no matter what Beaker did, she couldn't stop it. I'm wondering why Bunsen didn't step in. He just kind of watched it all happen silently. Beaker tried everything. She grabbed it. She tried bringing it back to her lair. There's a video on Twitter of some of her shenanigans with it. I think she got so frustrated, she just kind of like laid her head on it to smush it, to stop it from flopping. But as soon as she lifted her head up, it smacked her in the face. Anyways, I eventually rescued her, but it was pretty funny. Just because Beaker didn't know how to deal with this little robot. It's like a battery brick and a little flicky tail, and it just kept going everywhere. It was bananas. That's my story.
Okay, well, thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. Well, at least my section of the podcast. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
That's the end of another Science Podcast episode. Thanks for coming back week after week to listen to our show. Special thanks to our expert this week, Simon Spichak. Check the show notes for links to all of Simon's stuff. We'd also like to give a special shout out to the Pawpack. They help us by being patrons. Take it away, Chris.
Anne Schlarm, Sharon Dotson, Peggy McKeel, Chris Kelly, Samantha Dodd, Debbie Anderson, Courtney Proven, Renee Hardy, Mary Ryder, Shelby Leggett, Mary Coos, Marianne McNally, Karen Beth St. George, Bianca Hyde, Julie Smith, Andrew Lynn, Elizabeth Parmenter, Sandy Breimer, Tracy Halberg, Jenny Giger, Leela Perriello, Lisa Swartz, Catherine Jordan, Donna Craig, Jody Ogren, Liz Button, Kathy Zerker, and Ben Rathert.
For science, empathy, and cuteness.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that